Hi, my name is Tim Young, and this is the audition tutorial for the Ontario Provincial Honor Band for the clarinet. Let's talk about scales for a second. In front of you, you should have a page of full scales, obviously. While they're not exactly pretty to look at, they're essential to our development as a musician, be able to play scales. So as you can see, there are two different versions of the F chromatic scales there. It is recommended to play the 3 octaves, but it is also okay to play the second set if you're not entirely comfortable up at that altissimo range. I'm just going to play the 3 octave chromatic scale really quick. So obviously they're not exactly easy to hit as you approach that altissimo note. One thing that you should take note is that if you can help it, try not to hold down the E flat key as the helper for the C sharp, because it really it raises the pitch as we usually do for the altissimo notes. But for the C sharp, it's really not necessary. I'm not sure how much I talk about this at school, but with the chromatic scale, there are quite a few switches between the 2 fingers that we could totally avoid on the clarinet because we have so many alternate fingerings. The first one being the A sharp and the B natural. And instead of switching back and forth like so, we could use the banana key here to avoid that nasty switch. As you can tell, it's obviously a lot cleaner, and it's also a lot easier as you try it. So there's that for the chromatic scale. If you would like to do the 2 octaves, it's not a problem. It's essentially the same thing, except you get to hold the middle, the high F there. Just make sure you breathe in plenty of air before you come back down. It was pretty straightforward. Now let's go to the A major scale. It is not a key that we normally get to look at during band. There's 3 sharps, and if we do play 3 sharps, that means the instruments in C will have to play in 5. Composers typically try to avoid that, but is it an A major scale? So F sharps we're pretty familiar with, and depending on your experiences, the C sharp may be a familiar note for you. The G sharp might be a new one though. A lot of students usually have trouble thinking through what the G sharp is. What it really is, it's the same thing as an A flat. It's an harmonic of an A flat. But obviously, when we're in a sharp key, we use sharps instead. Now let's go to arpeggio. The trick here is really just to blow a lot of air as you go from the low A to the high A. It's not a very long scale to do. So 1 breath should be more than enough, and with lots of excess air at the end. Not a whole lot of problems there. Now let's go to the D major. Now depending on your experiences, the high D might be a problem. The rest of it is pretty straightforward. Now let's go to the arpeggio. Obviously you want to play the rhythms as straight as possible. What I tried to demonstrate just now is that as you practice, you want to pay special attention as you go from the A to the high D back to the A. because that's the second break they have to worry about. But with a little bit of time and practice, there really should be no problem. Hi, my name is Tim Young, and welcome back to the clarinet tutorial for the Ontario Provincial Honor Band auditions. Now I'd like to talk about the Etude Set A. Let's look at it for a second. We see a lot and lots of long notes, not a whole lot of fast notes, and the tempo marking marks at 72, which is not exactly a fast tempo. This fun fact, this Etude is actually taken from the second movement of a Weber clarinet concerto, so it's quite well known in the clarinet world. The underlying accompaniment is basically eighth notes, eighth note pulses. So that's usually how I like to pace myself as I play this excerpt. I'm just gonna play the first phrase. So the whole phrase here is piano, but that really doesn't mean that you can't phrase as much as you want. Now let's move on to the next phrase. It goes much higher, and you don't get rest anytime soon until, say, bar 11. And I usually don't like to play through here in one breath. You could if you want, but let's just discuss the strategies I would use to tackle a phrase like this. The first real event for us, the players at least, is the leap from the F sharp to the B. It is imperative to play it very smooth and legato as we take take it up that fourth while crescendoing, so it doesn't stick out, so you don't get not exactly what we want. We want a graduate crescendo as we go from the F sharp to the second beat of the F sharp, to the third beat where the B is, and to the fourth beat. So the downbeat of bar 7 should really be the peak of that swell there. Now some people may have problems hitting that high D piano. So what I like to do is I like to practice it slurred. I would start with the downbeat of bar 9. So I hit the F sharp at the forte dynamic. At the crescendo, taking as much time as I want, and then I slur up to the D to practice. Now let's tackle the next phrase, starting at bar 12. Now it starts at a pianissimo dynamic, so we want to play very soft, okay? Again, no accents on high B. Blow through the low C sharp as you approach that leap. Instead of blowing as you get to the B, which is what I did for the first time to show you. Not a good idea, and we don't want dynamic spikes here. And obviously the last phrase. Now let's look at the second etude for a second. This is another excerpt taken from the same concerto but a different movement, so the character is quite different. first thing that jumps at me is that I usually like to play the low E with the right hand, left hand depending. I prefer the right. It doesn't matter if you use the left. It sounds the same, but it really develops a good habit to use to keep everything on one, keep most of the motion on one hand as long as you can help it. Now the second phrase is essentially the same. Now let's get bar 9. This is when all the 16th note madness starts, and it starts at the forte dynamic. It's not a very tricky passage. And make sure you manage your pinkies properly, so that you don't end up mixing it up. What I like to do is I like to prep my pinky on the key it's about to go on right before it. So as you can see, you go from even when I'm playing my left pinky is already on the B key. It really shouldn't be a whole lot of trouble for you. Just practice with a metronome. Slow it down if you have to. Slowing it down is really not that big of a deal. You can play it slightly faster, slightly slower. It's not a problem. So now let's look at the third one. This one is probably the most challenging of all of them. Obviously, it's in a different key, slightly slower tempo, but you have all sorts of leaps. And in my opinion, at least, the key to this excerpt is to play all your articulations properly. So going from the slur to tongue to in the first bar, going to your accents and tonguing everything, and then by bar 8 the pattern kind of changes. You have da 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 and da 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 da. So you want to be able to show that. I'm just going to play the first phrase for you first. So the first bar is really just B flat arpeggios. So there shouldn't be a whole lot of problems. Now let's look at bar 5. And you start to have your altissimo notes there. Once again, try to use the helper for the high D to correct the tuning. Now let's go into bar 9. Bar 9 shouldn't be a whole lot of problem. Just make sure you don't come in on the B flat late. That shouldn't be a whole lot of problem either. Just make sure you practice the F major arpeggio. Now bar 13. I have a little trick for you at the towards the end of the bar 14, where you have that B flat going to the F. There's actually a little fingering called the 1-and-1 fingering for the B flat. So instead of, which is obviously quite inconvenient, we play a B, and then we also use the first finger on your right hand. So you have your 1-and-1. And what you do is you just lift your middle finger and your ring finger of your left hand in order to go, you put down your middle finger and your ring finger of your left hand to go from B flat to the F. So practice hard, practice on the metronome, make sure your rhythms are there, and one thing that's very important is it doesn't matter how fast, how many notes you play, the sound, the tone is still very important. Now, so practice hard and good luck on your audition.